You start with the whey, and then you move into the yogurt. Full g.a.p.s diet, again, I'm not gonna hugely get into this because we're gonna talk about this later, but basically once you get through those 6 phases, you enter the full g.a.p.s diet, which you can eat any of the g.a.p.s legal foods to your heart's content. But you maintain the broth and the fermented foods, and you maintain the principles of intro, but you just have a more vast diet. Okay, so preparing for intro, if you're not used to whole foods, then I recommend Nourishing Traditions, cooking several recipes from Nourishing Traditions to familiarize yourself with traditional foods. Try some g.a.p.s recipes. Educate your family on the why behind g.a.p.s if you're planning on doing this with your family. Kids get on board when they understand why. Kids don't get on board when they think they're just being told what to do. It was a process for us to help our kids understand and be positive about the changes. Prepare some food in advance. I highly recommend you having some bone broth in the freezer. You will eat more than you think. Boil some meats and freeze them, and practice making sauerkraut. It's a little bit tricky sometimes. Not every one of my ferments has worked out, so start practicing now. Get your supplements ahead of time. Gather supplies. I recommend a really large stock pot of this nature or larger. I remember reading about freezing broth and thinking, when on earth are we ever going to have enough broth to freeze? Because we consumed it as fast as I could make it, but that day comes. I actually have a lot of frozen broth now. Blenders, great, good knives, cutting boards. This is a list of other helpful supplies. I'm not going to go through that right now, but the information's there for you. Okay, so my recommendation is not to skip the intro diet. Some people do go straight to the full g.a.p.s just to like practice kind of, and then go back to the intro. I was just ready, so we just went straight to the intro. But just whatever order you do it in, just don't skip the intro. Eventually get to the intro. So what I like about the intro is that it completely eliminates the question of what should we eat, because there's only a few options. And you eat them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So you don't have to worry about what to fix, because it's broth and more broth. And then you can just veggies as they come and meats. But I also think an interesting thought that I had about g.a.p.s is not to confuse easy with simple. g.a.p.s is actually very, very simple. It's just not easy. So just remember that. The first few weeks are the hardest. Like I said, the amount of time varies on intro. Prepare lots of food. I remember zucchini was our first vegetable that we started, and I went and bought I filled 4 produce bags. I mean, literally overflowing, breaking the produce bags with zucchini. I'm like, this is embarrassing. I'm hoarding the zucchini. And I thought, okay, this is gonna last us. This is gonna last us at least a week, maybe 2. I'm probably gonna cut some and freeze it. Oh no, it was gone in like probably 2 days. But that was all we were eating, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That was like the only vegetable choice for 3 days until we moved on to the next. So, yeah, I mean, to figure out what works for your family, but just know, if you have kids doing it, they're gonna be hungry. And you do not want kids squawking at you when everything takes hours to prepare. So just more food than you think. Quick and g.a.p.s, don't use it in the same sentence. Don't be too busy. Cut out extras from your life. You're going to be spending a lot of time in the kitchen. Some of you are very familiar with traditional foods already, so you understand the time involved. No eating out, no commercial food. Our rule is we don't ever compromise with our meats, our eggs, and our dairy. We are 100% grass-fed, pasture-raised. Like, it's just not a compromise to us. That's where we spend our money on our food. We do the very, very best we can with organic. We shop Real Foods. They have in-season foods, which is helpful, that are always organic. It's hard to be 100% organic here. We just don't have the long local growing seasons, but the Dirty Dozen rule, if you're familiar with that, follow that the best you can. My recommendation is don't look at recipes you can't have yet. Just don't even torture yourself. You might not tolerate all the foods as outlined, but just be patient. It comes. SCD has a protocol for the order of vegetables. We followed that loosely. It didn't work exactly for us, but So if you need specifics on the order of foods, SCD has a little more detail on that. Although I recommend the g.a.p.s protocol, but you can just reference that. Children typically heal faster than adults. That's a loose rule, but our friend Dr. Price is right. I highly recommend you get necessary dental work done. Your mouth can undermine all of this work you're doing. And we have some really good biomimetic dentists. That's not the purpose of this tonight, but if you're interested, I can give you more information. Biomimetic dentist is kind of like the way Dr. Price would have done dentistry. So I recommend getting your vitamin D levels tested. I was a year into g.a.p.s by the time I got mine. I kind of knew it was low, but I didn't really know how low. I thought my cod liver oil was going to take care of it. As soon as I got on a vitamin D supplement, my healing the healing that occurred in the 3 months after that vitamin D supplement was equivalent to what happened in the first year. So I wish I would. Vitamin D is so critical to the entire function of your body, especially your gut. So I recommend that. Don't get too caught up in other people's health problems and experience, as I tell you to go get your vitamin D level tested because of me. Don't get too caught up in other people's experience, but because everyone's experience is different. So my words of wisdom to pass on to you before we close would be teach your family the reward of doing g.a.p.s, and that is health. Even if it's just you doing it, teach them why so that they can support you in it. And just remember it's a therapeutic diet, that it's not going to last forever. My sister's quote I love. She says, g.a.p.s may seem extreme, but what's really extreme is never regaining your gut health. So I think that's a pretty good quote. We could do a whole class on children and g.a.p.s, how to make it work. I have a little bit of information here about how we did it with my kids with school. We let our kids trade their candy. We have appropriate treats at school for them, so if treats are handed out, there's something for them. But if they get treats elsewhere where there's not an appropriate treat, they can trade it. So we teach them that sacrifice concept again. You're trading something good for something better. And it is better. We usually give them a little bit of money, or they get tokens that they add up to go do activities with mom or dad. And it's way more motivating to them. Time means so much more to kids than food. So, and my kids are lovers of food, trust me. I just wanted to show you guys this really, really quickly. My daughter, her willpower is actually quite outstanding, but when we went on g.a.p.s, she wanted to see how much junk food she got. Just like people handing you food everywhere you go. And so it was kind of a weird thing, but we did it. We put it all in a little shelf in the freezer. And this is just a couple of months worth. It was completely overtaking a shelf in our freezer. So we took it out and took a little picture of it. And her response was, "Mom, that would have been a lot of sugar in my body." So for her, you don't have to do this, but I think for my kids to see what every single thing amounts to over time, it was a visual for her to realize there's a reason why we don't eat this. So g.a.p.s is possible at work. My husband travels every week. He flies, and he brought a cooler. He is like Superman. I look back and I'm like, I can't believe he did that. Bring your own food to social gatherings. Many of you are probably already doing that anyway. And one thing I learned is that if my children can stand up to food, they can probably stand up to almost anything, and they're learning that really, really young. Again, the principle of sacrifice. And a quote that I love is, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And I think g.a.p.s helps you make those necessary changes. And our philosophy at our house about health is that health is a blessing. And I know we have found that. So this is our fridge on intro diet on g.a.p.s. You can see it's all broth. And one little bottle of sauerkraut, a few soups, our Real Foods eggs, some chicken to eat, and some fats to cook in. That was it. It was the real deal. But we love the food. It's helped us a ton with so many of our underlying health issues. We've learned as a family that we can do hard things together and get good results. Our number one thing we love about g.a.p.s is that our healing journey continues. So that being said, I'm going to close, but I'm going to tell you one more thing about the broth. I'm thinking about it as you're passing this ghee around. You cook a lot with animal fats in the g.a.p.s diet. When you make your broths, you're going to get this layer of fat that's going to congeal at the top. When you put it in the fridge overnight, you cook with that. That's essentially rendered fat. You can render it one step further because you may have a little bit of particles from the broth on it, which will make it go rancid eventually. We store it in the fridge, but we go through it fast enough. But if you want to render it further, you heat it on low to medium heat on your stovetop, and then you strain it to make sure any particles are out of it. And this is rendered venison fat, deer fat, but this will last, honestly, probably forever. But you can just scoop out of it and cook with it as needed. So I'm just telling you that little tidbit because you're gonna need a lot of fats to cook with, so save that fat at the top of especially your beef broth. Okay, that's it. Are there any questions?